Hello everyone and welcome to this week's lecture video. This is a really exciting week because this is the week where we kick off writing the Hallmark assessment task for this semester. So this is where we really get to apply everything that we've talked about up until now. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through over the next few weeks each section of the hat, and we're going to talk in detail about what each section really is about, what it needs to discuss, and we'll connect it to writing your paper for the end of the semester. So let's get right into it. We're going to start with the assessment piece. Now, I know that in your syllabus that the section called history actually comes first, and that is true. You will have a section called history, but in that section it should be pretty brief, just a kind of a synopsis and overview of your organization, nothing too detailed. So really it's this first assessment section that is the most important thing that we want to focus on at this point. So today we're going to talk about defining assessment, carrying out assessment, and then of course we'll connect it to the Hallmark assessment task for this class. So firstly, what is assessment? So assessment's an orderly process for investigating or understanding something. We could also think of it as an inventory or a reflection. And sometimes I like to use an analogy to sort of think about what an assessment is. And in this case, the analogy is sort of like vital signs. Probably most of us have had our vital signs collected. That would be temperature, pulse, blood pressure, etc., right? The reason we say that's an assessment is that that kind of gives you an idea of how healthy or unhealthy you are at a given point, right? Now, those things can change. Your temperature can change, and likely does. Your pulse changes, your blood pressure changes. It can go up and down, right? So these things measure a point in time, right? It gives you an idea of what the state of what something is right now, okay? In this case, we have to think about what it is we want to know and how do we measure it. So again, think about this sort of vital sign assessment. What is it that we want to know? What are the most important things that we want to know? And those sometimes will change too, right? With new medical evidence, sometimes we'll come out and say, well, now we need to know this about a person. And how do we measure it? Again, that can change as well. So we'll talk about some of these things as we move forward for this class. So there's some inherent weaknesses in different kinds of assessments. The first thing is bias. People aren't always truthful, right? So when you ask people questions, when you sort of you interview them for something, they may not always be truthful, and they may be not truthful in a positive way or in a negative way, right? So that's considered bias. We don't always get the exact information that we're looking for. The other issue is validity, and we have to ask the question, are we really measuring what we think we are? So if we say we're measuring leadership, is it really leadership that we're measuring, or is it something else? The other issue, and we mentioned it sort of just briefly a moment ago, and that's cross-sectionality. Most assessments are a snapshot, a once-in-time sort of thing, but not a movie, right? A movie kind of gives you a more detailed examination of something. It shows how something progresses through time. A snapshot is just that point-in-time comparison, right? It's just right now. How are things right now? And that's what we call cross-sectionality. So how do we mitigate these weaknesses? Well, there's lots of things that we can do. We can talk to different kinds of people. We can talk to multiple people. We can look at things from different angles. But ultimately, we do have some weaknesses when carrying out any kind of assessment in an organization. Okay? So for our class, we'll use what's called the organizational snapshot. Now, that's available to you in Blackboard, and it's available in PDF form or in a PowerPoint format, so you can have access to either one. So let's take a look at it now. So this is the organizational snapshot that is available to you, and it tracks along with Kennedy's book. So in her book, one of the first sections that she talks about is having to do the assessment, and she provides us with this organizational snapshot tool to help us do that, to help us get an idea of where our organization stands as far as diversity is concerned. Okay. So she goes through each of these 7 areas: leadership, culture, involvement, business, strategy and measures, staffing and development, and ownership. And she talks about what each of these means. So she does that to try to give us a baseline understanding, common understanding of what each one of them are. So what I'm asking you to do is I'm asking you to fill out this organizational snapshot for yourself, as well as for 3 people that you'll interview for this process, for this from this organization, from the organization that you choose, okay? So let's just take a look here. Let's say that, and this is based on your your reflection, your opinion, right? So let's say that you think leadership is pretty effective, so we'll give it a 7 out of 10. We go on throughout. So culture we think is a little bit higher. Involvement, we think our organization could do some work, better work there. Business, we give it a 4. Strategy and measure, a 5. Staffing and development, we'll give that a 4. And then ownership, we'll give a 7. So this gives us an idea of how our organization is sort of assessed at this point. Now, remember what we talked about with bias. This is your opinion, right? This is just one person's opinion, and this opinion could change over time. So it's a snapshot. It's a point in time. It's one person's opinion. Again, which is why I ask you to go talk to 3 additional people. Now, a total sample size of 4 people is not going to give you really, the end all be all of what your organization is assessed at. But it does give you at least a little bit more data to work with. Okay. So let's say though that you ask someone to take the snapshot as you interview them, and they come up with different results than you. So let's say that theirs is just a little bit different. So what do you do with that? In your final paper, what I'll ask you to do is just take an average. Just take an average and report out the average of the 4, and so that's 3 people, including yourself, the average of the 4, and just report those findings. Now, in your paper, you can report this in various different ways. You can report it, for example, like this is shown. You could do a graph like this. You could just do a short table, whatever. But I do want you to include the results of your snapshot in that first section of your HAT paper, okay? So what do we do with this information now that we have it? So let's say we take our assessment and we figure out that our organization is ranked in the 7 areas in various ways. The important thing to remember is that it helps us understand where we are, but really not necessarily where we want to go. Now, one could argue that if we have low scores in an area, that we would say that assessment would help us, say, improve in that area, or we're really good in an area, so we need to keep doing what we're doing. And that is true. But again, the assessment by itself only helps us know where we are. We have to continue to do other things and think about other plans, other strategies to determine where we want to go, okay? And lastly, assessments help our understanding of a situation, organization, or individual, but don't forget about the weaknesses. Be skeptical about those things. Think about what people are really trying to say. Think about what people aren't saying. So be skeptical, be critical about these things. So let's talk about specifically how this connects to the HAT. So you'll complete the snapshot. Your interviewees will complete the snapshot when you interview them. Certainly if you wanted to get their snapshot done before the interview, that's okay too. But you'll include the average of the 4 scores in the final paper. So as a reminder, here is what is asked for in the assessment section of the HAT. So in the syllabus it says, utilizing the organizational snapshot, you should provide information on the current state of your organization's diversity efforts. Briefly describe each area of assessment and consider questions like the following. What is your organization's official diversity statement? How does it align with the mission of the organization? What initiatives are currently taking place to advance diversity? So again, the assessment piece is really to sort of help us think about where are we now? Where is this organization right now in terms of diversity, both in good and bad ways? Again, be skeptical, be critical. List out the good things, list out the bad things. I often see papers that are have these glowing praises for organizations around diversity. Be critical about it. See what else your organization could be doing. See what are the good and the bad things, okay? And lastly, some reminders for you. Think about the following questions as you're writing this. Is there a strategy or tactical idea that speaks to you? You might want to detail that. How will you go about gathering information for the first section of this paper? So this could be things like looking at websites, maybe internal documents, which you don't have to include. Again, talking to people, looking at mission statements, things like that. Who will you speak with? Will it be colleagues of yours? Will it be people outside of your department? How will you get access to them? Do you know these people? Are you friends with them? Do you have good working relationships with them? Or will you just go ask people from that you may not know? And lastly, what information do you feel is relevant to assessing the state of diversity in your organization? Maybe there are other things that you need to consider. Maybe there are certain things that your organization can or can't do because of its size. You know, smaller organizations tend to be a bit less sophisticated when it comes to diversity simply because of a resource issue. So think about those things. You'll do well on this section. This section, it provides the groundwork, the foundation for moving forward into each of the other sections that we'll do for the hat. So this is a really important section. It's really important to get started on the right foot. So I know you'll do well, and I look forward to seeing your work.